Hey there, restless minds and weary souls. Tonight, we're stepping away from the chaos of modern life and drifting back through the sands of time to ancient Egypt. Not for battles or betrayals or dramatic palace intrigue, but for something far more soothing: the quiet, methodical rhythm of daily routine, specifically, the daily routine of history's most famous queen, Cleopatra VII. Now, before you click away thinking this sounds too exciting for bedtime, let me promise you something. We're not here for Hollywood drama or breathless storytelling. We're here for the slow, steady cadence of ordinary moments, the gentle repetition of ancient rituals, the kind of historical details that wash over you like warm water, predictable and peaceful. So dim your lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let your breathing slow as we explore not the legend of Cleopatra, but the woman, her morning ablutions, her afternoon administrative duties, her evening meals, the unremarkable yet fascinating patterns that filled her days along the banks of the Nile over 2,000 years ago. The sun rises over Alexandria in the year 47 BCE. It's the same sun that rises over your bedroom window today, following the same ancient path across the sky that it has traced for millennia. But this morning, we're watching its golden light filter through the marble columns of the royal palace, casting long shadows across polished floors that have felt the footsteps of pharaohs for generations. Cleopatra stirs in her sleeping chamber as the first pale light touches the eastern walls. There are no alarm clocks here, no jarring electronic sounds to shatter the peace of dawn. Instead, time moves as it always has, marked by the gentle progression of light and shadow, by the distant calls of birds beginning their day along the harbor, by the soft footsteps of servants who have already been awake for hours, preparing for their queen's awakening. The royal bedchamber is not the opulent Hollywood set you might imagine. Yes, there is luxury here, but it's the understated luxury of true wealth. The bed itself is a low platform of cedar wood, inlaid with ivory and precious stones, but worn smooth by use. The mattress is stuffed with the finest down, brought from the far reaches of the empire, and covered with linen so fine it feels like silk against the skin. Linen, always linen in Egypt, where the flax grows tall in the delta, and the weavers have perfected their craft over centuries. The queen's sleeping garments are simple: a loose shift of white linen, unadorned save for the quality of the weave itself. Her hair, that famous hair that poets would write about and artists would attempt to capture, lies loose across the pillow, dark and thick and real. No elaborate styling survives the night. No crown rests upon her head as she sleeps. In these quiet moments before the day begins, Cleopatra is simply a woman of 22, breathing softly in the pre-dawn stillness. As consciousness returns gradually, she doesn't leap from bed with purpose or urgency. The pace of royal life, for all its complexity, moves differently than our modern rush. There is time for the slow emergence from sleep, for the gentle transition from dreams to wakefulness. So she lies still for several minutes, listening to the sounds of the palace beginning its daily rhythm. Footsteps in distant corridors, the soft murmur of voices, the faint splash of water being poured into basins. Her personal attendants know to wait. They've learned the rhythms of their queen's morning over months and years of service. They stand quietly in the adjoining chamber, holding fresh linens and bronze mirrors, waiting for the signal that their mistress is ready to begin the elaborate process of becoming Cleopatra the queen rather than simply Cleopatra the woman. The signal comes not with words, but with movement, the rustle of linen as she sits up in bed, the soft placement of feet on the cool marble floor, and then, like a carefully choreographed dance that has been performed countless times before, the morning routine begins. First comes water, always water in Egypt, where the Nile gives life to everything, and cleanliness is both practical necessity and religious obligation. But this is not the hurried splash of a modern morning shower. This is ritual, ceremony, meditation, in motion. A servant enters carrying a basin of bronze, so polished it gleams like gold in the morning light. The water has been drawn fresh from the palace cisterns, filtered through sand and charcoal, then warmed over carefully tended fires. It's the perfect temperature, tested by servants who know that water too hot will redden the royal skin, while water too cool will shock the system into unpleasant wakefulness. The queen extends her hands, and warm water flows over her fingers, her palms, her wrists. She cups the water and brings it to her face, not splashing, but allowing it to flow gently across her skin. This is not about efficiency. This is about the slow, methodical cleansing that prepares both body and mind for the day ahead. Another servant approaches with a second basin, this one containing water scented with oils. Rose oil from Damascus, brought by merchant ships across the Mediterranean. Myrrh from the lands to the south, carried by caravans across the desert. The scents are subtle, not overwhelming, chosen not for show but for their gentle, calming properties. As the scented water flows over her hands and face, Cleopatra breathes deeply, allowing the fragrances to clear her mind and settle her thoughts. This is meditation without the formal structure, mindfulness practiced through the simple act of attending to physical sensation. The washing continues methodically, arms, shoulders, neck, each movement deliberate and unhurried. The servants work with practiced efficiency, but they too understand that this is not a race. This is preparation, both physical and spiritual, for the complex demands of ruling an empire. As the washing concludes, fresh linen towels are brought forward, not the rough hemp that common people might use, but linen so fine it seems to absorb moisture through the gentlest touch. The queen is dried with the same careful attention that marked the washing, each movement respectful and thorough. Now comes the process of dressing, and here we see the first transformation from private woman to public queen. But even this transformation happens gradually, layer by careful layer. The undergarment is again the finest linen. Cut simply but sewn with extraordinary skill, it fits closely without binding, providing a foundation for the more elaborate garments that will follow. Over this comes a longer tunic, this one dyed a soft blue-green that echoes the color of the Nile in certain lights. The dye comes from a particular plant that grows only in specific regions of Egypt, and the process of creating this exact shade takes weeks of careful preparation. The sleeves of the tunic are wide and flowing, designed not just for comfort, but for the graceful gestures that royal protocol demands. When Cleopatra extends her hand in greeting or blessing, the fabric will fall in elegant folds, creating a visual poetry of movement that reinforces her authority without seeming calculated or artificial. Over the tunic comes a light robe, this one of white linen so fine it's almost transparent. It's not meant to provide warmth or coverage, but rather to add layers of texture and movement to her appearance. As she walks, the robe will flutter gently, creating an aura of ethereal grace that observers will remember long after she has passed. The sandals are works of art in themselves, leather as soft as fabric, dayed to match the tunic, with soles of cork that will cushion each step across the marble floors of the palace. The straps are woven with threads of gold, not for ostentation, but for the way they catch and reflect light as she moves. As each garment is added, as each strap is fastened and each fold is arranged, Cleopatra stands patiently, allowing her servants to work their careful magic. This is not vanity, but preparation for performance. She understands that her appearance is part of her authority, that every detail will be noticed and interpreted by those who see her throughout the day. But even as she's being transformed into the public figure of the queen, there's something meditative about the process. The repetitive motions, the gentle touch of fabric against skin, the gradual layering of identity. It's a daily ritual that grounds her, connects her to her body and her physical presence in the world, even as it prepares her to transcend the merely personal and become a symbol of Egypt itself. The dressing complete, attention turns to her hair. This will be a longer process, requiring multiple servants and considerable time. But for now, it's simply gathered loosely at the nape of her neck, held in place with a simple band of gold. The elaborate styling will come later, after the morning meal and the first round of daily business. For now, she's ready for the next phase of her morning routine, the gradual transition from private preparation to public presence, the careful steps that will take her from the intimate space of her sleeping chamber to the formal halls where she will conduct the business of ruling one of the most powerful nations in the ancient world. But that transition, like everything else in Cleopatra's morning, happens slowly and deliberately. There's no rushing toward the demands of the day, no anxious hurry to begin the complex work of statecraft. Instead, there's this careful, methodical progression from one state of being to another. She moves now from her sleeping chamber to an adjoining room where the morning meal awaits. The breakfast is simple by royal standards, but elegant in its simplicity. Fresh bread, still warm from the palace ovens, made from the finest wheat that grows in the fertile delta. Honey, golden and thick, harvested from hives tended by palace beekeepers who understand their craft as both art and science. Fresh fruit arranged with careful attention to color and texture. Figs that burst with sweetness when bitten. Grapes so perfect they seem almost artificial to modern eyes accustomed to mass production. Dates stuffed with almonds and drizzled with more of that perfect honey. To drink, there's fresh water flavored with mint that grows in the palace gardens, and diluted wine. The alcohol content so low, it's more like flavored water than anything that would affect consciousness. This is sustenance, not indulgence, fuel for the long day ahead rather than pleasure for its own sake. Cleopatra eats slowly, savoring each bite not because the food is extraordinary, but because the act of eating slowly is itself a form of meditation. Each flavor is noticed and appreciated. Each texture is felt fully before the next bite is taken. This is mindfulness practiced through the most basic of human activities. As she eats, she's not alone. A small group of trusted advisors joins her for this morning meal, but the conversation is kept deliberately light. No urgent matters of state are discussed over breakfast. No crises are analyzed or decisions demanded. Instead, There's gentle discussion of the weather, of news from the harbor, of the progress of various palace construction projects. This too is part of the ritual, the gradual warming up of the mind for the more complex challenges that will come later. Like a musician running scales before attempting a complex composition, Cleopatra uses this breakfast conversation to prepare her thoughts for the intricate harmonies of diplomacy and administration that will fill her day. The meal concludes as slowly as it began. There's no checking of timepieces, no rushing to stay on schedule. Time moves differently in this world, measured not by minutes, but by the completion of tasks, by the natural rhythm of human activity rather than the artificial urgency of mechanical devices. As the breakfast dishes are cleared away by silent servants, Cleopatra prepares for the next phase of her morning routine. The gradual transition from private person to public queen continues, each step as carefully orchestrated as the ones that came before. The palace gardens beckon next, and this daily walk represents perhaps the most peaceful element of Cleopatra's morning routine. These are not the formal, geometrically precise gardens that will characterize later periods of history. Instead, they flow naturally along the contours of the palace grounds, incorporating both Egyptian and Greek design principles in a harmony that mirrors the cultural fusion of Alexandria itself. The path winds between carefully tended beds of papyrus, their tall stalks swaying gently in the morning breeze that carries the salt scent of the nearby harbor. Lotus flowers float serenely in shallow pools, their petals opening to catch the strengthening sunlight. Date palms provide shade and structure, their fronds rustling with a sound like gentle rain on fabric. Cleopatra walks this path every morning, not because protocol demands it, but because her body and mind have come to crave this transition between the enclosed spaces of her private chambers and the public halls where she will spend most of her day. The walk is neither hurried nor dawdling. Her pace is steady, measured, allowing her to notice the small changes that mark the progression of seasons and the daily cycles of plant and animal life. A servant walks several paces behind, close enough to respond to any need but far enough to preserve the meditative quality of the walk. Occasionally, Cleopatra pauses to examine a particular flower or to watch the fish moving lazily in one of the garden pools. These moments of stillness are not delays, but integral parts of the experience, opportunities for the kind of observation and reflection that will inform her decisions throughout the day. The garden sounds create their own peaceful symphony, the splash of water flowing from bronze fountains designed by Greek engineers, the melodic calls of birds that nest in the carefully maintained trees, the distant hum of activity from other parts of the palace complex, muffled by distance and vegetation into something soothing rather than distracting. As she walks, Cleopatra's breathing naturally synchronizes with her steps, creating an unconscious rhythm that calms both body and mind. This is exercise without exertion, movement that energizes rather than exhausts. Her sandals make barely a whisper against the smooth stone paths, and the morning air feels cool against her skin, despite the promise of heat that will come later in the day. The garden walk concludes at a small pavilion overlooking the harbor. Here, Cleopatra pauses for several minutes, watching the activity of the great port that is the heart of Alexandria's prosperity. Ships arrive and depart with the tides, their sails white against the blue of the Mediterranean. Merchants and sailors move about their business with the purposeful energy of commerce, but from this distance their activity appears almost choreographed, like a dance performed for the Queen's morning contemplation. This daily observation of the harbor serves multiple purposes. It connects her viscerally to the economic lifeblood of her kingdom. It reminds her of Alexandria's position as a crossroads between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and it provides a gentle transition between the purely personal time of her morning routine and the public responsibilities that await her. From the pavilion, she returns to the palace proper, but not directly to the formal halls of state. Instead, she enters what might be called her private study, a room that reflects both her intellectual interests and her practical needs as a ruler. The walls are lined with scrolls and codices, works of literature, philosophy, mathematics, and statecraft collected from across the known world. Some are written in Greek, others in Latin, still others in Egyptian hieroglyphs or the various scripts of trading partners from distant lands. Cleopatra reads in multiple languages, a skill that serves her well in diplomatic negotiations, but also provides her with intellectual pleasure during quiet moments. A large table dominates the center of the room, its surface covered with maps, correspondence, and reports from various parts of her kingdom. But this morning review of paperwork is conducted with the same unhurried attention that characterized her earlier activities. Each document is read thoroughly, considered carefully, and set aside only when she is satisfied that she understands its implications. The correspondence includes letters from governors of distant provinces, reports on crop yields from the fertile Nile Delta, updates on construction projects throughout the kingdom, and diplomatic communications from foreign courts. Each requires a different type of attention, a different mode of thinking, but Cleopatra moves between them fluidly, her mind adapting to each new challenge without strain or haste. A secretary sits at a smaller table nearby, ready to take dictation or to retrieve additional documents as needed. But much of this morning review is conducted in silence, with Cleopatra making notes in her own hand on wax tablets that can be smoothed clean and reused. Her handwriting is clear and efficient, the product of excellent education and daily practice. The maps receive particular attention. These are not merely decorative objects, but working tools, marked with information about trade routes, military positions, and political boundaries. Cleopatra traces these routes with her finger, visualizing the movement of goods and people across her territory, considering how changes in one region might affect conditions in another. The morning light streaming through the study windows gradually strengthens as this review continues. Shadows shift across the table surface, marking the passage of time without the urgency that mechanical timekeeping would later impose on human activity. When the review is complete, it's not because a schedule demands it, but because the work itself has reached a natural conclusion. Now comes one of the most important and time-consuming elements of Cleopatra's daily routine. The elaborate process of hairdressing and cosmetic preparation that will transform her from a private individual into the public image of royal authority. This transformation takes place in yet another chamber, one specifically designed for this purpose. The walls are polished marble that reflects light evenly, eliminating harsh shadows that might interfere with the precise work ahead. Multiple bronze mirrors of different sizes can be positioned to provide views from every angle. Low stools and tables hold an array of cosmetic tools and preparations that would rival any modern beauty salon in their variety and sophistication. The hairstyling begins with a thorough brushing using combs carved from ivory and brushes made from the finest animal hair. Cleopatra's hair is thick and naturally wavy, requiring careful management to achieve the elaborate styles that royal protocol demands. The brushing itself takes considerable time, as each section must be worked through completely to eliminate tangles and distribute natural oils evenly from root to tip. The servants who perform this work are specialists trained from childhood in the arts of royal grooming. Their hands move with practiced confidence, never pulling or tugging, always working with the natural texture of the hair rather than against it. They understand that this process is as much about the queen's comfort and relaxation as it is about achieving a particular appearance. Oil is worked through the hair in sections, not ordinary oil, but preparations scented with rare perfumes and designed to add both luster and manageability. The oil application is followed by more brushing, then the gradual sectioning of the hair into the patterns that will support the day's chosen style. Today's style is relatively simple by royal standards, but still requires considerable skill to execute properly. The hair is gathered into a low knot at the base of the skull, then wrapped and pinned in place with golden hairpins shaped like lotus flowers. Smaller sections are left loose around the face, then carefully curled using heated bronze tools and arranged to frame her features attractively. The entire process takes more than an hour, but it's conducted with the same meditative quality that has characterized the entire morning. There's no rush, no anxiety about time passing. Each step is completed thoroughly before the next begins, and the result is a hairstyle that will remain perfect throughout the long day ahead. As the hair styling nears completion, attention turns to cosmetics. This too is an elaborate process, but one guided by principles of enhancement rather than transformation. The goal is not to create an artificial appearance, but to emphasize Cleopatra's natural beauty in ways that will be visible even from a distance in the large halls where she will conduct official business. The foundation is a preparation made from ground pearls and precious minerals mixed with oils to create a smooth paste that evens skin tone without appearing heavy or mask-like. It's applied with soft brushes made from exotic animal hair, worked into the skin so thoroughly that it seems to emerge from within rather than being painted on from outside. Eye makeup receives the most attention, as it will be the focal point of her appearance throughout the day. The famous kohl-rimmed eyes of Egyptian royalty require considerable skill to achieve properly. The kohl itself is made from ground minerals, mixed with oils, and applied with thin bronze tools that require a perfectly steady hand. The application begins with a thin line close to the lashes, then gradually builds in intensity and width. The goal is to create the dramatic effect that Egyptian art has made famous while ensuring that the makeup will remain perfect throughout the hours of public appearances. Additional touches complete the cosmetic preparation. A subtle rouge made from crushed minerals adds color to the cheeks. The lips are tinted with a preparation made from red ochre and oils. Perfume is applied sparingly to pulse points, chosen for its staying power and its subtle enhancement of natural body chemistry rather than for overwhelming intensity. The entire cosmetic process, like the hair styling before it, is conducted with ritualistic precision. Each step builds upon the previous one, creating a cumulative effect that transforms the private woman into the public symbol of royal authority and divine favor. As this transformation nears completion, the morning routine that began with such simple activities as washing and dressing has evolved into something approaching high art. But even now, there's no sense of urgency or artificial deadline. The process continues at its own pace, guided by the natural rhythm of skilled work, rather than the arbitrary demands of mechanical time. The final touches of the cosmetic preparation complete, Cleopatra rises from the low stool where she has sat with remarkable patience for the better part of 2 hours. The transformation is complete, but it's not jarring or sudden. Instead, it feels like the natural culmination of all the careful steps that came before. The private woman hasn't disappeared. She's simply been enhanced, prepared, made ready for the public role that awaits. A full-length mirror of polished bronze is brought forward, and for a moment, Cleopatra studies her reflection with the critical eye of someone who understands that appearance is a tool of statecraft. Every detail is examined and approved. The fall of her robes, the arrangement of her hair, the subtle enhancement of her features. Nothing is left to chance, because nothing can be left to chance when you rule an empire where perception often matters more than reality. But this examination is brief and practical rather than vain. Satisfied that the preparation has achieved its intended effect, she turns away from the mirror and moves toward the next phase of her day. The gradual transition from private morning routine to public royal duties continues, each step as carefully orchestrated as those that came before. The morning's first official appointment takes place in what might be called an informal audience chamber. Not the great throne room where major ceremonies are conducted, but a smaller, more intimate space designed for the kind of detailed administrative work that keeps an empire functioning smoothly from day to day. The chamber itself reflects the careful balance between accessibility and authority that characterizes much of Cleopatra's approach to rule. The ceiling is high enough to inspire respect, but not so imposing as to intimidate those who come seeking audience. Columns of marble support the roof, their surfaces carved with hieroglyphs that tell the story of Egypt's long history and divine favor. Light enters through carefully positioned windows, supplemented by oil lamps that can provide additional illumination when needed. The overall effect is one of dignified comfort, a space that encourages honest conversation while never allowing visitors to forget that they stand in the presence of royal authority. Cleopatra takes her place on a chair that is elevated slightly above the floor level, but is not quite a throne. The symbolism is deliberate. This is official business, but not the most formal kind. The chair itself is beautifully crafted from ebony and ivory, its back carved with the symbols of Egyptian royalty, but it's designed for comfort during long sessions rather than purely for display. The morning's first visitors are provincial administrators, men responsible for governing various regions of Egypt on behalf of the crown. They arrive carrying scrolls and tablets filled with reports, requests, and recommendations that require royal attention and decision. The pace of these meetings is unhurried but efficient. Each administrator is given sufficient time to present his concerns thoroughly, and Cleopatra listens with the kind of focused attention that makes clear she understands the importance of the details being discussed. Her questions are precise and informed, revealing a deep knowledge of local conditions and administrative procedures. A scribe sits nearby, recording the substance of each conversation and the decisions that emerge from it. But much of the real work happens in the subtle interplay between ruler and administrator, the careful balance of authority and consultation that allows effective governance across vast distances in an age before rapid communication. One administrator reports on the Nile flood levels in his district, a matter of crucial importance in a land where agricultural prosperity depends entirely on the river's annual inundation. The flooding this year has been neither excessive nor insufficient, he explains, but exactly what farmers hope for. The fields are properly soaked, the soil enriched with fresh silt, and the growing season promises to be productive. Cleopatra nods approvingly at this news, but her questions probe deeper. What about the canals and irrigation ditches? Have they been properly maintained and cleared of debris? Are there sufficient workers available for the harvest when it comes? Has grain storage been organized to prevent spoilage and ensure adequate reserves for the lean months before next year's harvest? Each question demonstrates her understanding that good news about flood levels is only the beginning of successful agricultural management. The administrator's answers are detailed and confident, suggesting that the provincial administration is functioning effectively. But Cleopatra continues to probe, ensuring that no important details have been overlooked or glossed over. Another administrator brings concerns about border security in the southern regions, where Egyptian territory meets the kingdoms of Nubia. There have been minor incursions, he reports, not full-scale invasions, but cattle raids and merchant harassment that could escalate into more serious problems if not addressed promptly. The discussion that follows reveals the complexity of governing an empire that stretches across multiple climate zones and cultural regions. Military force is one option, but it's expensive and can create as many problems as it solves. Diplomatic negotiation might be more effective, but it requires careful understanding of local customs and political structures. Cleopatra listens to various options and alternatives, some asking questions that reveal her grasp of both military tactics and diplomatic strategy. Her eventual decision is characteristically nuanced. A small military force will be dispatched to demonstrate Egyptian strength and resolve, but it will be accompanied by experienced diplomats authorized to negotiate agreements that address the underlying causes of the border tensions. The morning continues with a steady stream of similar consultations. Trade disputes that require royal arbitration. Construction projects that need additional funding or modified timelines. Personnel appointments in distant provinces where local knowledge must be balanced against central authority. Each matter receives careful attention, but the pace remains steady and unhurried. There's time for thorough discussion, for consideration of alternatives, for the kind of thoughtful decision-making that effective governance requires. No one is rushed, no important details are skipped over, and no decisions are made hastily simply to clear the schedule. As the morning advances, the light streaming through the chamber windows shifts and strengthens. Servants move quietly around the periphery of the room, refreshing water bowls, adjusting lamp wicks, and attending to the small details that maintain the chamber's atmosphere of dignified efficiency. Cleopatra remains focused throughout these sessions, her attention never wavering despite the repetitive nature of much administrative work. She understands that effective rule depends as much on patient attention to mundane details as on grand strategic vision. The daily work of governance is largely composed of exactly these kinds of routine consultations and incremental decisions. Satus, the morning's final appointment involves a different sort of visitor entirely. A delegation of merchants from Rhodes arrives seeking expanded trading privileges in Egyptian ports. They bring samples of their goods and detailed proposals for new commercial arrangements that would benefit both their island home and the Egyptian treasury. This negotiation requires a different set of skills than the administrative consultations that preceded it. These merchants are not Egyptian subjects, but foreign traders whose loyalty must be earned rather than commanded. The discussion involves careful consideration of prices, shipping schedules, customs duties, and port facilities. Cleopatra demonstrates her fluency in Greek during these negotiations, switching easily between languages as the conversation demands. Her questions reveal detailed knowledge of Mediterranean trade routes and market conditions. She understands the merchant's needs and constraints, but she also protects Egyptian interests with skillful bargaining. The eventual agreement satisfies both parties, establishing new trading relationships that will bring exotic goods to Egyptian markets while generating revenue for the royal treasury. But the negotiation process itself has been as important as its outcome, demonstrating Egyptian sophistication and fairness in a way that will encourage other foreign traders to seek similar arrangements. As this final morning appointment concludes, the administrative phase of Cleopatra's day draws to a close. The decisions made during these sessions will affect thousands of people across the empire, but they've been made without drama or urgency, through patient consultation and careful consideration rather than hasty judgment. The transition to the next phase of the day happens gradually, like everything else in Cleopatra's routine. There's no abrupt shift from one type of activity to another, no jarring change of pace or focus. Instead, the morning's administrative work flows naturally into the midday activities that await. Servants begin clearing away the scrolls and tablets that accumulated during the morning sessions. The scribe organizes his notes and prepares clean writing materials for the afternoon's work. The chamber itself is subtly rearranged to accommodate different types of activities. But before the formal midday activities begin, there's time for a brief respite, a moment to step back from the intense focus that administrative work requires and prepare mentally for the different challenges that lie ahead. Cleopatra rises from her chair and moves to one of the chamber windows, where she can look out over the palace gardens and the harbor beyond. The sun is now high enough to cast sharp shadows, and the morning coolness is giving way to the heat that will dominate the afternoon hours. From this vantage point, she can observe the daily rhythms of Alexandria. Merchants setting up their stalls in the agora, ships loading and unloading cargo at the harbor docks, citizens going about their daily business in the streets and squares of the greatest city in the Mediterranean world. This brief observation serves multiple purposes. It provides a moment of visual rest after hours of close attention to documents and detailed conversation. It connects her viscerally to the city and people she governs. And it offers a transition between the morning's focus on administrative details and the afternoon's broader concerns with policy and strategy. The view from the window also reminds her of Alexandria's unique position in the ancient world. This is not just another provincial capital, but a cosmopolitan center where Greek learning meets Egyptian wisdom, where African goods mingle with Asian luxuries, where ideas and innovations flow as freely as the ships that crowd the harbor. As she stands at the window, a servant approaches discreetly with a goblet of water flavored with fruit juices. The refreshment is welcome after the morning's concentrated work, and it provides another small ritual that marks the transition between different phases of the day. The water is cool and sweet, drawn from the palace cisterns and flavored with juices extracted from the finest fruits in the royal gardens. The act of drinking slowly and mindfully serves as a brief meditation, a moment of pure sensory experience that clears the mind for the work ahead. This interlude at the window lasts only a few minutes, but it's an essential part of the daily rhythm. Like the morning walk in the gardens, it provides a buffer between intense periods of focused activity, allowing both body and mind to reset and prepare for new challenges. As the brief respite concludes, Cleopatra turns away from the window and prepares for the next phase of her day. The midday hours will bring different types of responsibilities, different kinds of decisions, different ways of exercising the complex authority that comes with ruling one of the ancient world's great empires. But that transition, like all the others in her carefully structured day, will happen gradually and deliberately. There's no rushing toward the next appointment, no anxiety about time passing. Instead, there's the same measured pace that has characterized the entire morning, the same attention to ritual and routine that transforms the simple act of daily living into something approaching art. The servants begin preparing the chamber for its next use, moving furniture and adjusting lighting to accommodate the afternoon's activities. Cleopatra herself takes a few moments to review mentally the morning's decisions and conversations, ensuring that important details are firmly fixed in memory before new concerns claim her attention. This brief review is conducted with the same methodical care that has marked every other aspect of the morning routine. Nothing is hurried, nothing is overlooked, nothing is treated as unimportant. The daily work of ruling an empire requires this kind of careful attention to detail, this patient accumulation of small decisions and incremental actions that collectively determine the fate of millions. As the morning finally gives way to midday, as the sun reaches its highest point and the shadows shrink to their smallest compass, Cleopatra prepares to continue the ancient dance of power and responsibility that defines her life. The morning's routines have prepared her well for whatever challenges the afternoon may bring, grounding her in the physical rhythms of daily life, while connecting her to the larger patterns of imperial governance. The day is far from over, but its foundations have been laid with care and precision. Whatever comes next, it will be met with the same patient attention, the same methodical approach, the same careful balance between personal needs and public responsibilities that has characterized these peaceful morning hours along the banks of the eternal Nile. The midday meal arrives as all things do in Cleopatra's world, with ceremony and deliberation. The dining chamber where she takes her afternoon repast is neither the grandest room in the palace nor the most intimate. It occupies that careful middle ground that characterizes so much of royal life, formal enough to maintain dignity, comfortable enough to allow for genuine nourishment and brief respite. The chamber overlooks an inner courtyard where a fountain sends water cascading over carved stone figures of Egyptian gods. The sound of falling water creates a constant, gentle background that masks conversation and provides the kind of white noise that soothes rather than distracts. Columns frame the view of the courtyard, their surfaces painted with scenes from Egyptian mythology, but the colors have been chosen for their calming properties rather than their dramatic impact. The table itself is low in the Egyptian manner, surrounded by couches rather than chairs. This arrangement encourages a more relaxed posture, a slower pace of eating that aids digestion and allows for the kind of unhurried conversation that Cleopatra finds necessary during the middle of her demanding days. The meal begins with the washing of hands, a ritual that serves both practical and ceremonial purposes. Servants bring bowls of scented water and soft linen towels, and the cleansing is performed with the same careful attention that marked the morning's ablutions. Water flows over fingers and palms, washing away the morning's work and preparing both body and spirit for nourishment. The food arrives in a carefully orchestrated sequence, each course timed to allow for proper appreciation and digestion. The first dishes are light and cooling, designed to refresh rather than fill. Fresh vegetables from the palace gardens, their flavors enhanced by subtle seasonings that complement rather than overwhelm their natural tastes. Cucumbers sliced thin and dressed with oil and vinegar. Lettuce leaves so crisp they seem to contain their own coolness. Radishes carved into decorative shapes that please the eye as much as the palate. These are not substantial foods, but they serve to awaken the appetite and prepare the stomach for the heartier dishes that will follow. The bread served with the midday meal is different from the morning's simple loaf. This is ceremonial bread, baked in special molds that give it symbolic shapes, representing prosperity and divine favor. The grain has been ground to an almost powder-fine consistency, and the resulting bread is so light it seems to dissolve on the tongue. It's served warm from the ovens, releasing fragrances that speak of careful cultivation and skilled preparation. Fish forms the centerpiece of today's meal, as it does on most days when the morning's catch has been particularly fine. The fish comes from the Mediterranean, brought to the palace kitchens while still fresh enough to gleam like silver in the morning light. It has been prepared simply, grilled over charcoal, and seasoned with herbs that grow in the palace gardens. The preparation allows the natural flavor of the fish to dominate, enhanced but not masked by the careful application of seasonings. Fennel adds a subtle licorice note. Oregano provides an earthy depth. A squeeze of lemon brightens all the other flavors without overwhelming them. This is cooking as an art form, but art that serves nourishment rather than mere display. Accompanying the fish are preparations of legumes that have been cooked slowly until they reach a creamy consistency that requires no chewing. Lentils flavored with garlic and cumin, chickpeas mashed with olive oil and herbs. These dishes provide substance and satisfaction while maintaining the meal's overall sense of lightness and digestibility. Wine is served, but like the morning's breakfast wine, it has been diluted with water until the alcohol content is minimal. The goal is refreshment and the enhancement of flavor, rather than any alteration of consciousness. The wine is sweet, made from grapes grown on the palace grounds and aged just long enough to develop complexity without losing their fresh fruit flavors. Cleopatra eats slowly, savoring each bite with the same mindful attention she brings to all her activities. Conversation during the meal is kept deliberately light, focusing on pleasant topics that aid digestion and provide mental rest from the morning's administrative concerns. A small group of trusted courtiers joins her for this midday meal, but their presence is more companionable than functional. These are not working sessions, but opportunities for the kind of informal social interaction that even queens require for their mental and emotional well being. The conversation ranges across topics, both practical and philosophical. News from the harbor about unusual cargoes or interesting passengers, observations about the palace gardens and their changing seasonal appearance. Gentle philosophical discussions about the nature of beauty or the relationship between wisdom and age. None of these conversations are urgent or demanding. They flow naturally from topic to topic, guided by interest and curiosity, rather than any agenda or predetermined outcome. This is the kind of mental recreation that allows the mind to process and integrate the morning's work while preparing for the afternoon's challenges. As the meal progresses, the pace remains unhurried. There are natural pauses between courses, moments when conversation stops, and everyone simply enjoys the quiet pleasure of good food in comfortable surroundings. These silences are not awkward, but restful, part of the meal's overall rhythm of nourishment and restoration. The final course consists of fresh fruits and honey-sweetened preparations that provide a gentle conclusion to the meal. Dates stuffed with almonds and drizzled with honey. Figs so ripe they practically burst with sweetness. Grapes that have been chilled in the palace ice houses until they provide a cooling contrast to the afternoon heat. A special preparation of sweetened cheese, flavored with rosewater and formed into delicate shapes, provides a more substantial ending to the meal. This is not heavy food, but it has enough richness to signal that the meal is reaching its natural conclusion. Throughout the meal, servants move almost invisibly around the chamber, refilling goblets, removing empty dishes, and attending to the countless small details that maintain the atmosphere of relaxed elegance. Their movements are so practiced and unobtrusive that they seem almost choreographed, part of the meal's overall harmony rather than intrusions upon it. As the meal draws to its close, the hand-washing ritual is repeated, but now it serves to mark the transition from nourishment back to the day's responsibilities. The scented water and soft towels are presented with the same ceremony that marked the meal's beginning, creating a sense of completion and preparation for what comes next. The midday meal has lasted nearly 2 hours, but the time has passed without any sense of urgency or waste. This is time invested in the Queen's physical and mental well-being, ensuring that she will be properly nourished and refreshed for the afternoon's work. In a world where effective leadership requires sustained mental energy over long periods, such investment in basic health and comfort is not luxury but necessity. As the meal concludes and the dining chamber is quietly cleared, Cleopatra prepares for one of the most important and intellectually demanding portions of her day. The afternoon hours will be devoted to what might be called policy work, the kind of broad strategic thinking that shapes the long-term direction of the kingdom rather than merely responding to immediate administrative needs. This work takes place in yet another chamber, one specifically designed to support extended periods of concentrated thought and analysis. The room is larger than the morning's administrative chamber, but more intimate than the great halls where formal ceremonies are conducted. Its proportions have been calculated to encourage focus without creating a sense of confinement. The walls are lined with maps, not decorative representations, but working documents marked with detailed information about trade routes, military positions, agricultural regions, and political boundaries. These maps are updated regularly as new information arrives from throughout the empire, and they serve as both reference tools and aids to strategic visualization. A large table dominates the center of the room, its surface covered with documents, reports, and correspondence that require not just reading, but careful analysis and integration. These are not the routine administrative matters that filled the morning, but complex policy questions that may affect the kingdom's direction for years to come. Scrolls containing reports from Egyptian embassies in foreign capitals lie alongside intelligence assessments about neighboring kingdoms' military capabilities and political stability. Trade statistics are arranged next to demographic studies. Religious reports from temple administrators share space with engineering proposals for new construction projects. Cleopatra settles into this work with the same methodical approach that has characterized her entire day. Each document is read thoroughly, not just for its immediate content, but for its implications and connections to other aspects of governance. This is the kind of reading that requires active engagement, constant analysis, and the ability to see patterns and relationships that may not be immediately obvious. The first document she examines is a comprehensive report on grain production throughout the kingdom. Egypt's agricultural prosperity is the foundation of its political and military power, and understanding trends in food production is essential for everything from tax policy to foreign relations. The report contains detailed statistics from each of the kingdom's agricultural regions, but Cleopatra reads beyond the numbers to understand their broader implications. A slight decline in production in one region might indicate problems with irrigation infrastructure. An unexpected increase in another area could suggest opportunities for expanded cultivation or changes in farming techniques. She makes notes as she reads, not just recording facts, but identifying questions that need further investigation and connections that might not be obvious to the report's authors. Her marginalia reveals a mind that processes information systematically while remaining alert to unexpected patterns and implications. The next document requires a different kind of analysis. This is a diplomatic assessment of the current political situation in Syria, where competing factions vie for power in ways that could significantly affect Egyptian interests. The report contains not just factual information, but judgments about the reliability of various sources and the likely accuracy of different pieces of intelligence. Reading such reports requires the ability to weigh probabilities, assess the credibility of sources, and understand the complex motivations that drive political behavior in foreign courts. Cleopatra demonstrates these skills through the questions she writes in the margins and the connections she draws between apparently unrelated pieces of information. A third document presents an entirely different challenge. This is a proposal from the kingdom's chief engineer for a massive construction project that would improve navigation on one of the Nile's major branches. The proposal includes detailed technical specifications, cost estimates, and timelines, but evaluating it requires understanding not just the engineering challenges, but the broader economic and political implications. Cleopatra studies the engineering drawings with the same careful attention she gave to the diplomatic intelligence, asking questions that reveal her grasp of both technical and strategic considerations. How would the construction affect existing shipping patterns? What would be the impact on communities along the affected river sections? How would the project's costs compare to its long-term economic benefits? Each document receives the same kind of thorough, multidimensional analysis. Tax policy proposals are evaluated not just for their revenue potential, but for their effects on different social classes and economic sectors. Military reports are read not just for their immediate tactical implications, but for what they reveal about longer-term strategic trends. As the afternoon progresses, a pattern emerges in Cleopatra's approach to this policy work. She reads each document individually and thoroughly, but she also constantly looks for connections and relationships between different areas of concern. Agricultural policy affects trade relationships, military deployments influence diplomatic negotiations, religious developments and impact social stability. This integrative approach to policy analysis is perhaps the most intellectually demanding aspect of Cleopatra's role as queen. It requires not just intelligence, but wisdom, not just knowledge, but judgment, not just information, but understanding. The ability to see how changes in one area of governance will ripple through all the others is what distinguishes effective rulers from mere administrators. Periodically during this afternoon work session, advisors join Cleopatra to discuss specific documents or policy questions. But these consultations are different in character from the morning's administrative meetings. Rather than seeking decisions about immediate practical matters, these discussions explore alternatives, examine assumptions, and test ideas against experience and expertise. One such consultation involves the kingdom's treasurer, who has been asked to review the engineering project proposal from a financial perspective. His analysis goes beyond simple cost calculations to consider the project's effects on the kingdom's overall fiscal position and its implications for other planned expenditures. The discussion that follows reveals the complexity of major policy decisions in an era when economic, political, and military considerations are inextricably intertwined. The engineering project might be technically feasible and economically beneficial, but would it require resources that might be needed for military purposes if international tensions escalate? Would the construction timeline conflict with other important projects already underway? Another consultation brings together advisors with expertise in religious affairs and foreign relations to discuss a delicate diplomatic situation involving temple privileges in a recently acquired territory. The local priesthood has requested certain exemptions from Egyptian law, but granting these requests might set precedents that could complicate governance in other regions. The discussion explores not just the immediate diplomatic implications, but the broader questions of how to integrate newly acquired territories while maintaining the religious and cultural traditions that give Egyptian rule its legitimacy. These are the kinds of policy questions that have no simple answers, where wisdom lies not in finding perfect solutions, but in choosing approaches that best balance competing interests and values. As these consultations proceed, the afternoon light streaming through the chamber windows gradually shifts and softens. Shadows lengthen across the document covered table, marking the passage of time without creating any sense of urgency or pressure. The work continues at its own pace, guided by the complexity of the issues under consideration rather than arbitrary deadlines. Between consultations, Cleopatra returns to her solitary analysis of documents and reports. This alternation between collaborative discussion and individual reflection allows for both the benefits of collective wisdom and the deep personal understanding that effective leadership requires. A report on religious festivals throughout the kingdom receives particular attention, not because it presents immediate problems, but because it offers insights into the spiritual and cultural currents that shape Egyptian society. Understanding these deeper currents is essential for anyone who hopes to govern effectively over long periods. The report details not just the formal observances prescribed by tradition, but the spontaneous expressions of religious feeling that arise in different communities. Regional variations in ritual practice, changes in the popularity of different deities, and the emergence of new forms of religious expression all provide clues about social trends that may eventually have political implications. Another document analyzes trade patterns with kingdoms along the Red Sea coast, regions that provide Egypt with exotic goods and serve as intermediaries for commerce with even more distant lands. Changes in these trading relationships could affect not just Egyptian prosperity, but the kingdom's strategic position in the complex web of international commerce. The analysis reveals subtle shifts in trade volumes and patterns that might indicate changing political conditions in distant regions or the emergence of new commercial opportunities. Understanding these trends requires the ability to think beyond immediate cause and effect, to consider how developments in remote areas might eventually influence Egyptian interests. As the afternoon work session continues, the documents and reports begin to form a comprehensive picture of the kingdom's current position and future challenges. Agricultural prosperity provides a solid foundation, but changing weather patterns could affect future harvests. Military strength is adequate for current needs, but neighboring kingdoms are also strengthening their forces. Trade relationships are generally positive, but international political developments could disrupt established patterns. This kind of broad situational analysis is perhaps the most important intellectual work that Cleopatra performs. It requires the ability to synthesize vast amounts of detailed information into coherent assessments that can guide policy decisions. More importantly, it demands the wisdom to distinguish between problems that require immediate attention and trends that need monitoring but not immediate action. A final consultation of the afternoon brings together advisors from multiple areas to discuss what might be called grand strategy, the overall direction of Egyptian policy in an increasingly complex international environment. The discussion ranges across military, diplomatic, economic, and cultural considerations, seeking to identify both opportunities and threats that may not be apparent when looking at any single area in isolation. The conversation reveals the depth of expertise available to Cleopatra in her policy deliberations. Each advisor bring specialized knowledge and experience, but they also demonstrate the ability to think beyond their particular areas of responsibility to consider broader implications and connections. As this final consultation concludes, the afternoon's policy work draws to a natural close. The documents and reports have been thoroughly reviewed, the major issues have been identified and analyzed, and the groundwork has been laid for the specific decisions that will emerge from this analytical foundation. The chamber is gradually cleared of the day's paperwork, but not hastily or carelessly. Documents are organized and filed according to systems that will allow for easy retrieval when needed. Notes and marginalia are preserved as part of the ongoing record of policy development. Maps are updated with any new information that emerged during the afternoon's work. This careful attention to documentation and record keeping reflects an understanding that effective governance depends not just on good decisions, but on institutional memory that preserves the reasoning behind those decisions. Future policymakers will need to understand not just what was decided, but why, and the careful preservation of analytical work serves that long-term institutional need. As the afternoon's intellectual labors conclude, Cleopatra prepares for yet another transition in her daily routine. The evening hours will bring different types of responsibilities, different kinds of social interaction, different ways of exercising royal authority. But like all the day's transitions, this one will happen gradually and deliberately, allowing both body and mind to adjust to new demands and opportunities. The policy work has been intellectually demanding, requiring sustained concentration and analytical thinking over several hours, but it has also been deeply satisfying in the way that engaging with complex challenges can be when approached with adequate time and resources. This is the kind of work that makes effective governance possible, the careful analysis and thoughtful deliberation that must precede wise action. As servants begin preparing the chamber for its next use, Cleopatra takes a few moments to step back mentally from the afternoon's intensive focus on documents and reports. Like the brief respite that marked the transition from morning to midday activities, this pause serves to clear the mind and prepare for the different challenges that evening will bring. The view from the chamber windows now shows Alexandria in the golden light of late afternoon. The harbor bustles with the day's final commercial activities as ships prepare to sail with the evening tide. In the city's streets and squares, citizens go about the business of daily life, unaware of the careful policy deliberations that help ensure their continued prosperity and security. This daily reminder of the human consequences of governmental decisions is perhaps the most important element of Cleopatra's policy work. Behind every document analyzed and every decision made lie the lives and welfare of hundreds of thousands of people who depend on wise governance for their security and prosperity. As the golden afternoon light gradually gives way to the softer illumination of early evening, as the day's heat begins to dissipate and the first gentle breezes stir the air, Cleopatra prepares to continue the ancient rhythm of royal responsibility that has shaped her day from its earliest moments. The evening hours await, bringing their own rituals, their own challenges, their own opportunities for the exercise of wisdom and authority in service of the kingdom she has sworn to protect and guide. The evening hours begin with what might seem like a retreat from the day's responsibilities. But in Cleopatra's world, Even leisure serves the larger purposes of rule. The transition from the afternoon's policy work to evening activities happens gradually, marked not by the striking of bells or the consultation of timepieces, but by the natural shift in light and temperature that signals the approach of dusk. A servant enters the policy chamber carrying a basin of cool water scented with mint and rose petals. This is not the ceremonial washing that marked the morning's beginning, but a practical refreshment designed to clear away the mental fatigue that accumulates during hours of concentrated intellectual work. The water flows over Cleopatra's hands and wrists, its coolness providing immediate relief from the day's accumulated heat and tension. The scented oils in the water serve a purpose beyond mere luxury. The mint sharpens mental alertness, while the rose petals provide a subtle, calming influence. This combination helps facilitate the transition from the analytical mindset required for policy work to the more social awareness needed for evening activities. Even these small details of royal routine are calculated to support effective performance of royal duties. As the refreshing ritual concludes, attention turns to the evening's first formal requirement. This is what palace protocol designates as the sunset audience, a daily session when certain categories of petitioners and visitors are granted access to royal presence. Unlike the morning's administrative meetings or the afternoon's policy consultations, these evening audiences serve largely ceremonial purposes, but they fulfill the important functions in maintaining the connection between ruler and ruled. The evening audience chamber is different from either of the day's earlier meeting spaces. Larger and more formal than the morning's administrative room, yet more intimate than the great throne hall where major state ceremonies are conducted, it strikes the careful balance between accessibility and majesty that characterizes so much of Egyptian royal protocol. The chamber's proportions are designed to accommodate larger groups while maintaining acoustic properties that allow for clear communication. Columns of polished granite support a ceiling decorated with painted scenes from Egyptian mythology, but the colors are soft and warm rather than dramatically imposing. The overall effect creates an atmosphere of dignified approachability. Cleopatra takes her place on what is properly called the evening throne, distinct from both the simple chair used for morning administrative work and the great ceremonial throne reserved for major state occasions. This throne is elevated enough to ensure that she can be seen clearly by all present, but not so high as to create an unbridgeable distance between queen and subjects. The throne itself is a masterwork of Egyptian craftsmanship, carved from ebony and inlaid with gold and precious stones and patterns that tell the story of the kingdom's divine origins and continuing favor of the gods. But despite its obvious value and beauty, it has been designed primarily for function rather than display, providing comfortable support during what may be extended sessions. The evening's first petitioners are representatives of various craft guilds from Alexandria's commercial districts. They come not with urgent problems requiring immediate solutions, but with requests for royal recognition of new guild regulations and ceremonial presentations of examples of their finest work. A delegation from the Metalworkers Guild presents an elaborately crafted bronze mirror, its surface polished to perfection and its handle decorated with hieroglyphs celebrating the queen's wisdom and beauty. The presentation is accompanied by a formal recitation of the guild's history and contributions to Alexandria's prosperity. Cleopatra receives these presentations with gracious attention, asking questions that demonstrate her knowledge of metalworking techniques and her appreciation for skilled craftsmanship. Her responses are carefully crafted to acknowledge the guild's importance while reinforcing the connection between their work and the kingdom's overall prosperity. Similar presentations follow from representatives of other guilds. The weavers bring samples of linen so fine it seems to shimmer in the chamber's lamplight. The jewelers display necklaces and bracelets that catch and reflect light like captured stars. The perfume makers offer small vials of their most prized creations, scents that speak of distant lands and exotic trade relationships. Each presentation follows the same general pattern, but Cleopatra's responses reveal her detailed knowledge of different crafts and industries. She understands the technical challenges involved in creating fine metalwork, the skill required for superior weaving, the complex processes needed to create lasting perfumes. This knowledge is not merely ceremonial, but reflects genuine appreciation for the work that creates Alexandria's reputation for luxury and quality. Between guild presentations, individual petitioners are granted brief audiences. These are not matters requiring complex policy decisions, but personal requests that tradition allows subjects to bring directly to royal attention. A veteran soldier requests permission to name his newborn son after one of the royal family. A widow seeks assistance in recovering property that belongs to her deceased husband's estate. Each petition receives respectful attention, even when the matters involved are relatively minor. Cleopatra understands that these personal interactions serve important symbolic functions, demonstrating that royal authority remains accessible to ordinary subjects and that individual concerns matter to those who govern. Her responses to these petitions reveal both practical wisdom and genuine compassion. The soldier receives not only permission to use the royal name, but a small gift for the child, an assurance that his military service is remembered and valued. The widow's property dispute is referred to appropriate officials with clear instructions that the matter should receive prompt and fair resolution. As the formal presentations and petitions conclude, the evening audience transitions into what might be called a social reception. This is less structured than the earlier proceedings, allowing for the kind of informal conversation that helps maintain the personal relationships essential to effective governance. Court officials, visiting dignitaries, and prominent citizens mingle in the chamber, creating an atmosphere of relaxed but dignified social interaction. Servants circulate with refreshments, offering wine diluted with fruit juices and small delicacies designed to refresh without overwhelming. Cleopatra moves through these conversations with practiced ease, demonstrating the social skills that are as important to successful rule as administrative competence or policy insight. She remembers personal details about individuals she hasn't seen for months, asks about family members and business concerns, and shows genuine interest in the concerns and achievements of those around her. These conversations serve multiple purposes beyond mere social courtesy. They provide opportunities to gather information about conditions throughout the kingdom that might not appear in formal reports. They allow for the kind of personal relationship building that creates loyalty and trust, and they demonstrate the Queen's accessibility and concern for her subjects' welfare. A conversation with a merchant recently returned from trading expeditions along the African coast, provides insights into political conditions in regions beyond Egyptian borders. His observations about changing trade patterns and local political developments supplement the formal intelligence reports that cross Cleopatra's desk during policy sessions. Another conversation with a temple administrator reveals subtle shifts in religious sentiment that might eventually have political implications. The administrator's casual comments about changes in popular devotional practices and the emergence of new religious expressions provide the kind of grassroots information that formal religious reports often miss. A third conversation with a military officer responsible for border security offers perspectives on military readiness and morale that complement but don't duplicate the formal assessments provided during official briefings. His observations about troop training and equipment needs help ensure that policy decisions remain grounded in practical realities. Throughout these conversations, Cleopatra demonstrates the ability to listen actively while participating genuinely in social interaction. She asks follow-up questions that show she has absorbed important details, offers comments that reveal her own knowledge and experience, and maintains the kind of personal engagement that makes each conversation feel important and valued. As the reception continues, the chamber's atmosphere gradually becomes more relaxed and convivial. The formal constraints that governed the earlier presentations give way to the kind of easy social interaction that allows for both information gathering and relationship building. Musicians positioned discreetly in one corner of the chamber provide soft background music that enhances conversation without overwhelming it. The music is carefully chosen for its soothing qualities, featuring instruments and melodies that promote relaxation and social harmony rather than excitement or emotional intensity. The refreshments, too, are chosen with careful attention to their effects on mood and conversation. The wine is sufficiently diluted to prevent any loosening of tongues that might lead to indiscreet revelations, while the food is light enough to avoid the drowsiness that heavier fare might induce. As the evening progresses, the conversation gradually shifts from practical matters to more general topics. Discussions of philosophy, literature, and artistic developments provide mental recreation while maintaining the intellectual engagement that Cleopatra finds necessary for her own well-being. A conversation about recent developments in Greek poetry leads to a broader discussion of how cultural expression reflects and influences political sentiment. Another exchange about astronomical observations connects scientific knowledge to navigation techniques that support Egyptian trade relationships. These more abstract discussions serve important functions beyond mere entertainment. They provide intellectual stimulation that helps maintain mental acuity. They demonstrate the Queen's broad learning and cultural sophistication. And they create opportunities for the kind of indirect communication that allows sensitive topics to be explored without formal commitment. As the evening audience gradually draws toward its conclusion, the pace of conversation becomes more relaxed and reflective. The urgent business of the day has been completed, the formal presentations have been received, and the social obligations have been fulfilled. What remains is the kind of gentle, intellectual, and social interaction that provides both pleasure and restoration. The chamber's lighting is adjusted as natural light fades, with additional oil lamps being lit to maintain comfortable illumination. The warm light creates an atmosphere of intimacy and comfort that encourages continued conversation while signaling that the formal portions of the evening are drawing to a close. Cleopatra's own demeanor becomes noticeably more relaxed as the evening progresses. While maintaining the dignity appropriate to her position, she allows herself to engage more personally in conversations, sharing observations and experiences that reveal her individual personality rather than simply her royal role. A discussion of a recent theatrical performance in Alexandria's amphitheater leads to exchanges about the relationship between entertainment and social commentary. Cleopatra's comments reveal not only her appreciation for dramatic art, but her understanding of how cultural expression can influence public opinion and social attitudes. Another conversation about recent developments in medical knowledge demonstrates her interest in practical applications of learning that can benefit her subjects' welfare. Her questions show genuine curiosity about new treatments and techniques, as well as awareness of how medical advances might affect public health policy. As the evening audience finally concludes, the transition to the next phase of the day happens with the same gradual deliberation that has characterized all the day's activities. There is no abrupt ending, no rushed departure from social obligations. Instead, conversations wind down naturally, farewells are exchanged with appropriate ceremony, and the chamber gradually empties as guests depart with expressions of gratitude for the evening's hospitality. The conclusion of the evening audience marks the completion of Cleopatra's formal public duties for the day, but her routine is far from over. The remaining hours before sleep will be devoted to activities that serve both personal and political purposes, maintaining the careful balance between individual needs and royal responsibilities that defines her entire existence. As the last guests depart and the chamber is quietly cleared by servants, Cleopatra prepares for what might be called the evening's second phase. This will be devoted to activities that are less public but no less important for her effectiveness as a ruler and her well-being as a person. The transition begins with another brief ritual of refreshment and preparation. The evening's social interactions, while generally pleasant and productive, have nonetheless required sustained attention and emotional energy. Like any demanding performance, they leave behind a residue of fatigue that must be addressed before moving on to new activities. A servant brings fresh water scented with lavender and chamomile, herbs chosen for their calming and restorative properties. The washing is performed with the same careful attention that marked similar rituals throughout the day, but now the focus is on relaxation and restoration rather than preparation for new challenges. The scented water flows over hands and wrists, carrying away the accumulated tensions of social interaction. The lavender provides subtle aromatherapy that promotes mental calm, while the chamomile offers gentle relaxation that prepares both body and mind for the evening's remaining activities. As this brief restoration ritual concludes, attention turns to what palace routine designates as evening studies. This is time set aside for the kind of intellectual activity that serves both personal enrichment and professional development, reading and reflection that maintains the broad knowledge base essential for effective governance. The study chamber, where these evening activities take place, is perhaps the most personal space in the entire palace complex. While still maintaining the dignity appropriate to royal quarters, it reflects individual taste and preference more clearly than the formal chambers where public business is conducted. The walls are lined with scrolls and codices representing the accumulated learning of centuries. Works of history, philosophy, poetry, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine fill shelves that stretch from floor to ceiling. Some texts are written in Egyptian hieroglyphs, others in Greek or Latin, still others in the various languages of trading partners and diplomatic correspondence. A comfortable reading couch is positioned to take advantage of both natural light during the day and carefully arranged oil lamps for evening study. The couch is covered with soft cushions and throws that provide comfort during extended reading sessions, while nearby tables hold writing materials for note-taking and correspondence. The chamber's overall atmosphere is one of scholarly retreat, a space designed to support sustained intellectual engagement while providing the comfort necessary for extended periods of concentrated reading and reflection. This is where Cleopatra comes not as queen, but as student, pursuing the lifelong learning that effective leadership requires. Tonight's reading begins with correspondence from scholars and intellectuals throughout the Mediterranean world. As a patron of learning and supporter of Alexandria's great library, Cleopatra maintains relationships with leading thinkers whose insights help inform her understanding of developments in various fields of knowledge. A letter from a philosopher in Athens discusses recent developments in ethical theory and their potential applications to questions of governance and public policy. The writer explores how abstract philosophical principles might be translated into practical guidelines for rulers seeking to balance competing interests and values. Another letter from an astronomer in Rhodes reports new observations of planetary movements and their possible implications for navigation and calendar keeping. The technical details are complex, but Cleopatra follows the discussion with the kind of informed attention that reflects her solid grounding in mathematical and scientific principles. A third letter from a physician in Pergamon describes new treatments for common ailments and discusses recent advances in surgical techniques. The medical knowledge has obvious practical applications for public health policy, but it also reflects the kind of intellectual curiosity that drives genuine learning rather than merely practical application. Each letter receives careful attention, with Cleopatra making notes that will inform future policy discussions and correspondence. But the reading is also pursued for its own sake, as intellectual engagement that provides both pleasure and mental stimulation, independent of any immediate practical application. After completing the evening's correspondence, attention turns to more extended reading in works of literature and philosophy. Tonight's selection is a recently acquired manuscript of Greek poetry, verses that explore themes of love, loss, and the relationship between mortal experience and divine purpose. The poetry reading is conducted slowly and meditatively, with attention to both the beauty of the language and the depth of the ideas being expressed. This is not casual entertainment, but serious engagement with works that have shaped human understanding for generations. The poems explore questions that are both timeless and immediately relevant to someone in Cleopatra's position. How does one balance personal desires against public responsibilities? What is the relationship between power and happiness? How does one find meaning in a life constrained by duty and expectation? These themes resonate deeply with someone whose entire existence is shaped by the demands of royal responsibility. The poetry provides not answers, but perspectives, ways of thinking about fundamental questions that every thoughtful person must address, but that rulers face with particular intensity. As the poetry reading continues, the chamber's atmosphere becomes increasingly contemplative. The soft light of oil lamps creates pools of illumination that seem to isolate the reading couch from the outside world. The only sounds are the gentle rustling of papyrus and the distant murmur of palace activity winding down for the night. This kind of sustained engagement with serious literature serves multiple purposes in Cleopatra's daily routine. It provides intellectual stimulation that helps maintain mental acuity. It offers emotional and spiritual nourishment that balances the practical demands of governance. And it connects her to the broader currents of human thought and feeling that transcend the immediate concerns of political life. The evening's reading concludes with a brief review of historical texts that provide perspective on current policy challenges. These are not contemporary documents, but works that examine how previous rulers have addressed similar problems and what lessons might be drawn from their successes and failures. Tonight's historical reading focuses on accounts of diplomatic negotiations between Egypt and neighboring kingdoms during earlier periods. The specific circumstances are different from current conditions, but the underlying dynamics of international relations remain remarkably consistent across centuries. The historical accounts reveal patterns of negotiation and conflict that help illuminate current diplomatic challenges. They show how seemingly minor disputes can escalate into major confrontations, but also how skillful diplomacy can resolve apparently intractable problems through patient effort and creative compromise. More importantly, the historical perspective provides emotional and intellectual distance from current concerns that allows for clearer thinking about complex problems. By seeing how previous generations addressed similar challenges, Cleopatra gains both practical insights and the kind of philosophical perspective that prevents immediate concerns from overwhelming judgment. As the evening's study session draws to its conclusion, the accumulated effect of several hours of serious reading and reflection becomes apparent. The mental fatigue that followed the day's practical responsibilities has been replaced by a different kind of intellectual satisfaction, the pleasure that comes from sustained engagement with ideas and knowledge. The transition from study to the evening's final activities happens gradually, with time for the mind to process and integrate the evening's reading before moving on to the last elements of the daily routine. Books are closed and set aside, notes are organized for future reference, and the study chamber is prepared for the next day's intellectual activities. But even as formal study concludes, the contemplative mood that it fostered continues to influence the evening's remaining activities. The ideas and perspectives encountered during the reading session provide a mental backdrop that enriches even the simplest elements of the daily routine. The evening's final major activity is what might be called devotional time, though the religious practices of ancient Egypt differ significantly from modern concepts of personal worship. This is not a matter of private prayer in the contemporary sense, but rather participation in ritual observances that connect individual existence to the larger cosmic order that Egyptians believed governed all aspects of life. The devotional activities take place in a small shrine within the royal quarters, a space dedicated specifically to personal religious observance, rather than the grand public ceremonies conducted in the kingdom's great temples. The shrine is intimate in scale, but rich in symbolic content, every detail carefully chosen to support meditation and spiritual reflection. The central focus of the shrine is a statue of Isis, the goddess particularly associated with royal authority and divine wisdom. The statue is not massive, like those in public temples, but it has been carved with extraordinary skill and attention to detail. The goddess's expression suggests both compassion and strength, qualities that Cleopatra seeks to embody in her own rule. Surrounding the central statue are smaller representations of other deities important to royal ideology and personal devotion. Horus, the falcon-headed god with whom pharaohs are traditionally identified. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and learning. Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, whose feather weighs souls in the afterlife. The evening's devotional activities begin with the lighting of oil lamps and the burning of incense, creating an atmosphere that separates sacred time from the ordinary activities of daily life. The incense chosen for evening worship is frankincense, its clean, sharp scent designed to promote mental clarity and spiritual awareness. As the incense smoke rises and the lamp flames flicker gently in the still air, Cleopatra begins the evening prayers. These are not spontaneous expressions of personal feeling, but formal recitations that connect her individual worship to the great traditions of Egyptian religious practice. The prayers acknowledge the god's protection during the day's activities and seek their continued favor for the challenges that tomorrow will bring. They express gratitude for the kingdom's prosperity and security while asking for wisdom in the decisions that governance requires. But beyond their specific content, the prayers serve as meditation, repetitive recitations that quiet the mind and create space for reflection on deeper questions of purpose and meaning. The familiar words and rhythms induce a state of calm awareness that allows for genuine spiritual experience. After the formal prayers, time is devoted to what might be called contemplative reflection, silent meditation on the day's experiences and their larger significance. This is not analysis in the sense that characterized the afternoon's policy work, but rather the kind of spiritual reflection that seeks understanding rather than solutions. The meditation focuses particularly on questions of justice and wisdom, the fundamental virtues that Egyptian tradition demands of rulers. How well have the day's decisions reflected these ideals? Where might different choices have better served the kingdom's long-term interests? What lessons can be drawn from the day's experiences that will inform future actions? These are not questions that demand immediate answers, but rather themes for ongoing reflection that will continue to develop over time. The goal is not to solve problems, but to maintain awareness of the moral and spiritual dimensions of leadership that purely practical considerations might obscure. As the devotional time continues, the combination of incense, lamplight, and meditative reflection creates an atmosphere of profound peace and spiritual connectedness. The day's accumulated tensions and concerns seem to dissolve in this sacred space, replaced by a sense of alignment with purposes larger than immediate practical needs. The devotional activities conclude with expressions of gratitude for the day's experiences and renewed commitment to the responsibilities that tomorrow will bring. These concluding prayers are both personal and political, acknowledging the individual's dependence on divine favor while reaffirming dedication to the welfare of the kingdom and its people. As the lamps are extinguished and the shrine returns to darkness, the evening's spiritual observances leave behind a sense of completion and preparation. The day's work has been offered to the gods. Its lessons have been absorbed through reflection, and the foundation has been laid for whatever challenges the next day may present. The transition from devotional activities to the evening's final preparations for sleep happens naturally and without haste. The contemplative mood fostered by religious observance continues to influence these concluding activities, lending them a quality of peaceful completion rather than mere routine necessity. The evening's final preparations begin with the gradual removal of the day's formal attire, a process as ritualized and deliberate as the morning's dressing had been. Each garment is removed slowly, with careful attention to its preservation and proper storage. The elaborate jewelry is unfastened piece by piece, each item cleaned and placed in its designated container within the royal treasury. The blue-green tunic that had adorned her throughout the day is lifted gently over her head, its fine linen still holding the subtle fragrances of the oils and incense that had marked various ceremonial moments. The fabric is examined carefully for any damage or staining that might require attention before its next use, then folded with the same precision that characterized its original creation. The golden sandals are removed and inspected, their cork soles checked for wear, and their leather straps examined for stress or damage. These too are cleaned and stored with care, for in a world where even royal possessions must be maintained through skilled craftsmanship rather than easy replacement, every item receives respectful attention. As each layer of public identity is removed, Cleopatra seems to shed not just clothing, but the accumulated weight of royal responsibility. Her posture relaxes slightly, her movements become more natural and less conscious of their symbolic significance. The transformation is subtle but real, a return toward the private individual who exists beneath the public persona of queenship. The elaborate hairstyle that had required hours to create in the morning is now carefully dismantled. The golden pins, shaped like lotus flowers, are removed one by one, each placement and removal handled with the same attention that originally arranged them. As her hair is freed from its formal constraints, it falls naturally around her shoulders, returning to the simple beauty that no amount of artificial arrangement can improve. The cosmetics that had enhanced her features throughout the long day are gently removed using soft cloths and scented oils. The dramatic kohl that had rimmed her eyes is carefully wiped away, revealing the natural beauty that had served as foundation for the day's artificial enhancement. The rouge and lip tints that disappear under gentle cleansing, leaving behind skin that glows with health rather than applied color. This removal of cosmetics is performed with the same methodical attention that characterized their morning application. Each step follows established procedure. Each movement is deliberate and thorough. But now the goal is restoration rather than enhancement, returning the face to its natural state rather than preparing it for public display. The cleansing process concludes with the application of nighttime preparations designed to nourish and restore the skin after its day of cosmetic enhancement. These preparations are made from the finest oils and extracts, chosen not for their immediate visual effect, but for their long term benefits to skin health and appearance. Sweet almond oil is worked gently into the skin around the eyes, where the day's kohl application might have caused dryness or irritation. Rose oil is applied to the cheeks and forehead, its subtle fragrance providing aromatherapy benefits while its nutrients feed the skin. A preparation made from honey and milk is spread across the lips, replacing the artificial tints with natural moisture and healing properties. As the cosmetic removal and nighttime skincare conclude, attention turns to the selection of sleeping garments. These are chosen not for their symbolic significance or public impact, but purely for comfort and the promotions of restful sleep. The fabrics are the finest available, but their fineness serves function rather than display. The sleeping shift is made from linen so soft it seems to caress the skin rather than merely covering it. The weave is loose enough to allow air circulation during the warm Egyptian nights, but close enough to provide modest coverage and protection from insects that might disturb sleep. The garment's simplicity is its greatest luxury, representing freedom from the complex symbolism that governs daytime royal attire. Over the sleeping shift goes a light robe designed for warmth during the cooler hours before dawn. This too is made from the finest linen, but its cut and decoration are minimal. A simple belt of soft cord allows the robe to be adjusted for comfort, while loose sleeves provide coverage without restriction of movement during sleep. The feet, which have carried their burden of royal responsibility through marble halls and garden paths throughout the long day, are now bathed in cool water scented with mint and chamomile. The washing is thorough but gentle, designed to soothe and refresh rather than simply clean. The herbs provide subtle aromatherapy that promotes relaxation and prepares the body for rest. Soft slippers of silk and lamb's wool are placed on the newly cleaned feet, providing warmth and protection during the final activities before sleep. These are not the formal sandals that marked public appearances, but purely functional footwear designed for comfort and quiet movement across marble floors. As the evening preparations near completion, a servant brings the final refreshments of the day, a small goblet of water flavored with honey and herbs known for their sleep-promoting properties. The honey provides gentle sweetness, while the herbs, carefully selected and precisely measured, offer natural assistance for the transition from wakefulness to rest. The water is sipped slowly, savored not just for its taste, but for its symbolic significance as the day's final nourishment. Like everything else in Cleopatra's routine, even this simple act of drinking carries meaning beyond its immediate function. It represents completion, satisfaction, and preparation for the restorative sleep that will prepare her for tomorrow's challenges. The sleeping chamber has been prepared during the evening's activities by servants who understand the importance of creating an environment conducive to restful sleep. Fresh linens have been placed on the cedar bed, their clean scent mingling with the subtle fragrances of the oils and incense that marked the day's various activities. The bedding consists of multiple layers, each chosen for its contribution to sleeping comfort. The mattress, stuffed with the finest down and covered with linen of extraordinary softness, provides support without hardness. Over this are spread sheets of linen so fine they seem almost weightless, yet substantial enough to provide proper covering throughout the night. Light blankets of wool and silk are arranged for easy adjustment as night temperatures change. These can be added or removed without disturbing sleep, allowing for comfort throughout the night's natural temperature variations. The arrangement reflects deep understanding of sleep physiology and the importance of maintaining proper body temperature for restful slumber. Pillows of various sizes and firmness are arranged to support both head and body in positions that promote deep sleep. These are filled with materials chosen for their ability to maintain shape while providing comfort and covered with the same fine linen that characterizes all the chamber's textiles. The chamber's lighting has been reduced to a single oil lamp that provides just enough illumination for safety while creating the dim environment that promotes natural sleepiness. The lamp's flame is steady and quiet, designed to burn throughout the night without requiring attention while providing minimal disturbance to sleep. The air in the chamber carries the subtle fragrances of the evening's devotional activities, mixed with the clean scents of fresh linens and the gentle aromatherapy of the sleeping preparations. The overall effect is one of peaceful sanctuary, a space dedicated entirely to rest and restoration. As Cleopatra approaches the bed, her movements are slow and deliberate, allowing her body to adjust gradually to the prospect of sleep. There is no hurried rush to unconsciousness, but rather a gentle transition from the day's activities to the night's restorative rest. She settles into the bed with careful attention to comfort and proper positioning. The fine linens feel cool and smooth against her skin, while the down mattress adjusts to support her body without creating pressure points that might disturb sleep. The arrangement of pillows provides support for her head and neck in alignment that promotes both comfort and proper breathing. The evening's final moments are devoted to quiet reflection on the day's experiences and gratitude for its successful completion. This is not analysis or planning, but simple acknowledgement of the day's gifts and challenges, a mental settling that prepares consciousness for its temporary retreat into sleep. The thoughts that accompany this final settling are peaceful and positive, focusing on moments of satisfaction and accomplishment rather than concerns or anxieties. The morning's successful administrative sessions, the afternoon's productive policy work, the evening's pleasant social interactions, all are recalled with quiet satisfaction. There is also gratitude for the countless individuals whose work made the day possible. The servants who attended to countless details, the advisors who provided counsel and expertise, the citizens whose respect and cooperation allow governance to function effectively. Recognition of this mutual dependence provides a sense of connection and purpose that transcends individual concerns. As consciousness gradually fades and sleep approaches, the day's activities seem to settle into proper perspective. The immediate concerns that loomed large during active hours now take their place as elements in the larger pattern of ongoing responsibility and service. Problems remain problems, but they no longer carry the urgent weight that daylight perception assigns to them. The breathing gradually slows and deepens as the body's natural sleep mechanisms take over from conscious control. The heart rate settles into the slower rhythm appropriate for rest and restoration. Muscle tension accumulated during the day's activities gradually releases, allowing the body to assume positions of complete relaxation. The final conscious thoughts are neither anxious nor excited, but peacefully neutral, allowing the mind to disengage from active processing and drift into the different consciousness that sleep provides. This transition happens naturally and without resistance, the culmination of a day spent in harmony with natural rhythms rather than in opposition to them. The oil lamp continues to burn quietly in its corner, casting gentle shadows that move slowly across the chamber walls as the flame flickers in imperceptible air currents. The light is just sufficient to maintain orientation without disturbing the deep darkness that promotes sound sleep. Outside the chamber windows, Alexandria settles into its own nighttime rhythm. The harbor grows quiet as commercial activity ceases with the darkness. The streets empty of all but essential traffic. The great library closes its doors until dawn brings new readers seeking knowledge and wisdom. In the palace itself, the night watch takes over from day servants, maintaining security and attending to essential functions while the royal household rests. Guards patrol corridors with soft-soled sandals that make no sound on marble floors. Night servants move quietly through service areas, preparing for tomorrow's activities without disturbing tonight's rest. The rhythm of sleep that begins in the royal chamber spreads throughout the palace and beyond into the city itself. Alexandria sleeps, but not completely. Like all great cities, it maintains essential functions throughout the night while allowing its citizens the rest that tomorrow's activities will require. In the royal sleeping chamber, consciousness fades completely as natural sleep cycles take over. The day's memories settle into long-term storage. Its lessons integrate with accumulated experience, and the body begins the restoration processes that sleep makes possible. The breathing becomes barely audible, a gentle rhythm that marks the continuation of life during its most vulnerable and peaceful state. The heart continues its steady work, but at the reduced pace that allows maximum efficiency of rest and restoration. Throughout the night, the sleep will cycle through its natural phases, each serving different functions in the maintenance of physical health and mental well-being. Dreams may come, processing the day's experiences in the symbolic language of unconscious thought, or sleep may be dreamless, providing pure rest without the mental activity that even beneficial dreams require. The fine linen sheets rise and fall almost imperceptibly with each breath, while the down mattress continues to provide perfect support for the sleeping form. The chamber's temperature remains comfortable throughout the night's natural variations, while the gentle air circulation prevents stuffiness without creating uncomfortable drafts. As the night deepens and Alexandria grows ever quieter, the sleep continues undisturbed. The oil lamp burns lower but maintains its gentle illumination, while the shadows it casts grow longer and softer. The palace settles into complete stillness, except for the quiet footsteps of guards and the distant sound of water flowing in garden fountains. The queen sleeps peacefully, her day complete, her responsibilities fulfilled, her body and mind restored through the ancient rhythm of work and rest that has sustained human life since the beginning of time. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities for service and leadership. But tonight there is only rest, restoration, and the deep peace that comes from a day well lived and duties well performed. In this quiet chamber beside the eternal Nile, Surrounded by the accumulated wisdom and beauty of one of history's greatest civilizations, sleep continues its timeless work of restoration and renewal. The day is done, the night provides its ancient gifts, and morning will come again with its own possibilities and promises. The rhythm continues, as it has for thousands of years, as it will for thousands more. Work and rest, effort and restoration, responsibility and peace, all balanced in the eternal dance of human existence. And in this balance, even the most powerful ruler finds the same fundamental needs met through the same basic rhythms that sustain all human life. The sleep deepens, the night continues, and Alexandria dreams on beside the flowing waters of the Nile. The pre-dawn hours in Alexandria pass with the same measured rhythm that has marked the night. In the royal sleeping chamber, the oil lamp has burned lower, its flame now a mere whisper of light that barely illuminates the peaceful figure resting beneath fine linen covers. The breathing remains steady and deep, the body continuing its ancient work of restoration and renewal that sleep makes possible. Outside, the city begins its own quiet stirring, not the dramatic awakening of modern urban centers, but the gradual organic emergence from night's embrace that characterizes life lived in harmony with natural cycles. The harbor shows the first signs of activity as fishing boats prepare for their pre-dawn departure, their crews moving with the quiet efficiency of those who understand that the sea keeps its own schedule. In the palace kitchens, servants begin the careful preparation of the morning meal. Bread dough that has been rising through the night hours is shaped and placed in ovens that have been slowly heated with carefully tended fires. The aroma of baking begins to drift through service corridors, a gentle herald of the approaching day that disturbs no one but signals to those already awake that the night's work is nearly done. The palace gardens show their own signs of dawn's approach. Night-blooming flowers begin to close their petals as the first pale light touches the eastern horizon. The fountains continue their eternal music, but now their sound seems to anticipate rather than soothe, marking time's passage toward the moment when conscious activity will resume. In the royal chamber, sleep continues undisturbed despite these subtle changes in the world beyond. The body's natural rhythms recognize that rest time remains, that the restorative work of night is not yet complete. The breathing deepens slightly as the deepest phase of sleep continues its essential work. The dreams that come during these hours, if they come at all, are gentle and restorative rather than vivid or demanding. The mind processes the previous day's experiences without the urgency that conscious thought brings to such activities. Memories settle into their proper places, lessons integrate with accumulated wisdom, and the foundations are laid for the clear thinking that tomorrow's responsibilities will require. As the night reaches its deepest point, the silence in the royal quarters becomes almost complete. Even the guards move with extraordinary quiet, understanding that these hours of profound rest are sacred in their own way. The palace holds its breath, protecting the sleep that protects the one who protects the kingdom. The oil lamp flickers once, twice, then settles back into its steady burning. The shadows on the chamber walls shift almost imperceptibly, marking time's passage in the most gentle way possible. The fine linen sheets remain smooth and undisturbed, testament to the peaceful quality of the sleep they shelter. Alexandria itself seems to sleep more deeply during these pre-dawn hours. The commercial districts are silent, their shops and stalls waiting for morning to bring customers and activity. The residential areas show no lights except for the occasional lamp of someone attending to a sick child or elderly parent. Even the great library stands in darkness, its scrolls and codices resting like sleeping thoughts until dawn brings new readers. In the royal chamber, the temperature remains perfectly comfortable despite the night's natural cooling. The chamber's design, with its careful attention to air circulation and thermal mass, maintains conditions that promote continued restful sleep. The soft wool and silk blankets provide exactly the right amount of warmth, while the linen sheets allow skin to breathe freely. The sleeping figure shows no signs of disturbance or discomfort. The face remains peaceful, unmarked by the concerns that daylight brings. The hands rest quietly at the sides, no longer holding the symbolic objects of authority that mark conscious hours. In sleep, even the most powerful ruler becomes simply human, subject to the same needs and rhythms that govern all mortal existence. As the night progresses toward its end, the quality of sleep begins to change subtly. The deepest phases give way to lighter rest that prepares consciousness for eventual awakening. This transition happens gradually and naturally, without abrupt shifts that might disturb the restorative process. The dreams, if present, become more vivid but remain peaceful. Images of the Nile flowing endlessly toward the sea, of garden flowers opening to morning light, of ships sailing safely into harbor with their precious cargoes intact. These are the dreams of satisfied responsibility, of work well done, and duties properly fulfilled. The breathing remains steady, but begins to show the subtle changes that indicate approaching wakefulness. Not the immediate alertness that emergency might demand, but the gradual transition from sleep to consciousness that allows for gentle emergence into the new day's possibilities. Outside the chamber, the servants who will attend the morning routines begin their own quiet preparations. Fresh water is drawn from the cisterns and warmed to the perfect temperature. Clean linens are selected and arranged for easy access. The morning meal's final preparations begin in kitchens where every detail has been planned to ensure seamless service. The palace gardens show more definite signs of approaching dawn. Birds begin their tentative morning songs, not yet the full chorus that will greet the sun's arrival, but the preliminary notes that announce night's approaching end. The air carries the first hint of the warmth that the day will bring, mixing with the coolness that still lingers from the night hours. In the royal chamber, the oil lamp continues its faithful service, though its light now seems less necessary as the first pale glow begins to touch the eastern windows. The shadows on the walls grow softer and less distinct, preparing to give way to the clearer illumination that morning will provide. The sleep continues, but now with the subtle awareness that comes in the hour before natural awakening. The body begins its own preparation for consciousness, adjusting temperature and breathing patterns in anticipation of the transition from rest to activity. These changes happen so gradually as to be almost imperceptible, nature's way of ensuring that awakening comes gently rather than abruptly. The fine linen sheets remain smooth and undisturbed, but now they seem to anticipate rather than simply shelter. The down mattress continues its perfect support, but the body it cradles shows the first subtle signs of readiness for movement. The transition from night to day begins in the deepest layers of physical existence before consciousness recognizes any change. Outside, Alexandria continues its own gradual awakening. The fishing boats have departed for their day's work, leaving the harbor quieter, but somehow more expectant. Market vendors begin the careful process of setting up their stalls, moving with the quiet efficiency of those who understand that preparation determines the day's success. The great lighthouse of Alexandria, which has stood sentinel through the night hours, begins to seem less necessary as natural light starts its slow return. Its beacon has guided ships safely through the darkness, but now the approaching dawn promises the clearer vision that sunlight brings to navigation and all other human activities. In the palace, the night watch prepares for the transition to day duties. Reports are compiled on the night's activities, which in this peaceful time consist mainly of routine observations and the quiet maintenance tasks that keep a great household functioning smoothly. The changing of guards happens with ceremonial precision, but without the drama that emergency might require. The royal chamber remains a haven of peace and rest, but now it seems to wait rather than simply exist. The oil lamp's flame burns steadily, but its light seems less essential as the windows show the first hints of the natural illumination that will soon make artificial light unnecessary. The sleeping figure shows no signs of immediate awakening, but the quality of rest has shifted subtly toward the lighter phases that precede natural consciousness. The face remains peaceful, but now it seems to anticipate rather than simply rest. The hands remain still, but they seem ready to resume their daily work of holding the symbols and tools of royal authority. As the night reaches its final hour, the rhythm of breathing begins to change almost imperceptibly, still deep and regular, but now with the subtle variations that indicate approaching wakefulness. The body temperature adjusts slightly, preparing for the activities that conscious life will soon demand. The chamber's atmosphere remains perfectly conducive to continued rest, but now it seems to encourage preparation rather than simple sleep. The soft fragrances of the evening's aromatherapy have faded to barely perceptible traces, leaving the air clean and fresh for the new day's activities. Outside, the horizon shows the first definite signs of approaching sunrise. Not yet the dramatic colors that will mark the sun's actual appearance, but the subtle lightening that tells experienced observers that dawn is perhaps an hour away. This is the time when night truly begins its retreat and day prepares to claim its ancient dominion. The palace gardens respond to these subtle changes with movements so slight they might be imagined. Leaves seem to adjust their positions for maximum benefit from the coming light. Flowers that will open with the sun's arrival show the first hints of movement. The fountain's music seems to change key, becoming more welcoming and less protective. In the royal chamber, sleep continues, but now with the awareness that comes in the final phases of natural rest. The dreams, if present, become more connected to waking concerns. Images of the day's coming responsibilities begin to blend with the peaceful symbols that have marked the night's unconscious activity. The oil lamp flickers once more, not from disturbance, but as if acknowledging that its service is nearly complete. The shadows it casts have grown long and soft, preparing to give way to the clearer illumination that morning will provide. The chamber seems to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when rest will give way to the renewed activity of another day. The breathing deepens one final time before beginning the subtle changes that will eventually lead to natural awakening. The body completes its restorative work and begins the gentle transition back to consciousness. The mind processes the last of the night's dreams and prepares to engage once again with the complex realities of royal responsibility. Alexandria itself seems to pause in these final moments of night, gathering energy for the bustling activity that daylight will bring. The harbor waits for the return of fishing boats and the arrival of merchant vessels. The markets prepare for another day of commerce and social interaction. The great library stands ready to open its doors to scholars and students seeking knowledge and wisdom. In the royal chamber, peace continues to reign, but now it is the peace of completion rather than ongoing rest. The night has fulfilled its ancient promise of restoration and renewal. The body has been refreshed, the mind cleared, the spirit renewed for whatever challenges the new day may bring. The fine linen sheets seem to anticipate movement, though the sleeping figure remains perfectly still. The down mattress continues its perfect support, but now it seems ready to release rather than simply hold. The chamber itself seems to prepare for the transformation from place of rest to starting point for another day's royal responsibilities. As these final pre-dawn moments pass, everything waits in perfect readiness. The servants stand prepared to begin their morning duties. The palace holds itself in expectant stillness. The city gathers its energy for another day of life and commerce. And in the royal chamber, sleep reaches its natural conclusion, having completed another cycle in the eternal rhythm of rest and activity that sustains all life. The oil lamp burns steadily in its corner, ready to provide service until natural light makes its illumination unnecessary. The shadows wait to retreat before the advancing dawn. The chamber maintains its perfect atmosphere of peace and preparation. Soon, very soon, consciousness will return gently and naturally. Eyes will open to greet another day beside the eternal Nile. The careful routines that define royal life will begin again with washing and preparation and the gradual transformation from private individual to public queen. But for now, in these final moments of night's dominion, peace reigns complete and perfect. The sleep continues its ancient work of restoration. The body rests in perfect comfort. The mind floats free of conscious concerns. And in this state of profound rest, even the most powerful ruler participates in the fundamental rhythms that connect all human existence to the eternal cycles of nature and time. The night holds, but barely. Dawn approaches with its own inevitabilities. Another day waits to unfold with its own challenges and opportunities. But first, these final moments of perfect rest, these last precious minutes of peaceful sleep beside the flowing waters of the timeless Nile. The horizon blushes with the faintest suggestion of rose and gold, colors so subtle they might be imagined rather than seen. In the royal chamber, the oil lamp's flame has burned lower, its light now competing with the gentle infiltration of natural illumination that seeps through windows designed to welcome dawn's arrival. The sleeping figure remains motionless beneath fine linen, but even in unconsciousness, there's a sense of approaching completion, as if the body itself recognizes that night's restorative work draws near its end. The breathing shifts almost imperceptibly, still deep and regular, but now carrying the subtle rhythm that indicates the approach of natural awakening. Not the jarring interruption of artificial alarms, but the gentle transition that occurs when sleep has fulfilled its purpose and consciousness prepares to reclaim its daily dominion. The face remains peaceful, unmarked by the concerns that daylight will soon restore, but there's a quality of readiness that wasn't present in the deeper hours of night. Outside the chamber, Alexandria continues its own measured emergence from darkness. The harbor shows more definite signs of life as boats return from their pre-dawn fishing expeditions, their holds filled with the silver treasure that will grace tables throughout the city. The lighthouse's beacon still sweeps across the water, but its importance diminishes with each passing moment as natural light begins its ancient victory over artificial illumination. In the palace gardens, the transformation becomes more pronounced. Night blooming jasmine closes its petals in graceful surrender, while morning flowers prepare for their own moment of glory. The fountain's music seems to change tempo, becoming less a lullaby and more a gentle celebration of renewal. Birds add their voices to the growing symphony of dawn, not yet the full chorus that will greet the sun's arrival, but tentative notes look that test the air for readiness. The palace itself stirs with the quiet efficiency that marks the transition between night and day shifts. Servants move through corridors with practiced silence, their tasks focused on preparation rather than maintenance. Fresh linens are arranged in precise order. Water is heated to exact temperatures. The morning meal's final preparations begin in kitchens where every detail has been anticipated and planned. In the royal chamber, the oil lamp flickers once more, its flame seeming to acknowledge that its vigil nears completion. The shadows it has cast throughout the night grow softer and less distinct, preparing to yield to the clearer illumination that approaches. The chamber's atmosphere remains perfectly conducive to rest, but now it carries an undertone of anticipation, as if the very air prepares for the transformation from sanctuary of sleep to starting point of another day's responsibilities. The fine linen sheets rise and fall with breathing that grows marginally shallower, the body's natural preparation for the transition from horizontal rest to upright activity. The down mattress continues its perfect support, but the form it cradles shows the first subtle signs of readiness for movement. These changes happen so gradually they might escape notice, nature's way of ensuring that awakening comes as gently as sleep's arrival. The sleeping figure's hands remain still at the sides, but they seem somehow expectant, ready to resume their daily work of holding the symbols and tools of royal authority. The face, peaceful throughout the night's rest, shows no signs of disturbance, but there's a quality that suggests dreams may be shifting from the deep, symbolic processing of night to the lighter, more recognizable images that often precede awakening. Outside, the eastern horizon shows a more definite promise of the sun's approach. The pale colors strengthen almost imperceptibly, rose deepening toward coral, gold warming toward amber. It's still not true sunrise, but the experienced eye can read the signs that indicate dawn is perhaps 30 minutes away. This is the time when night truly begins its retreat and day gathers strength for its triumphant return. The palace fountains seem to respond to these subtle changes, their water catching the first hints of natural light and throwing them back in gentle sparkles that dance across marble surfaces. The air itself feels different, carrying the promise of warmth that will build throughout the coming day, while still retaining the coolness that has made the night's rest so perfectly comfortable. Mm. In the royal chamber, the transition continues with the same measured pace that has characterized the entire night. Also, sleep maintains its hold, but now it seems protective rather than simply restorative, guarding the final moments of rest before consciousness reclaims its daily territory. The breathing deepens one last time before beginning the subtle changes that will eventually lead to natural awakening. The chamber's temperature remains perfectly regulated, the careful design ensuring comfort throughout night's natural cooling and morning's gradual warming. The soft wool and silk blankets have provided exactly the right amount of covering, adjusting to the body's needs without conscious thought or intervention. The linen sheets remain smooth and undisturbed, testament to the peaceful quality of sleep they have sheltered. As these final moments of night pass, the oil lamp's flame grows smaller but burns more brightly, as if concentrating its remaining energy for maximum effect. The light it provides seems less necessary now, but it continues its faithful service until natural illumination makes its contribution redundant. The shadows on the chamber walls shift and soften, preparing their graceful retreat before the advancing dawn. The sleeping figure shows no signs of immediate awakening, but the quality of rest has shifted definitively toward the lighter phases that precede consciousness. The body temperature adjusts subtly, preparing for the activities that waking life will soon demand. The heart rate remains slow and steady, but shows the first hints of the slight acceleration that will accompany the return to conscious awareness. Outside the chamber, servants complete their final preparations for the morning routines. Fresh water stands ready at the perfect temperature. Clean linens are arranged with military precision. The morning meal waits in carefully timed stages of preparation, each element designed to reach perfection at exactly the moment it will be needed. The palace gardens display their own readiness for the approaching day. Dew forms on leaves and petals, creating tiny mirrors that will catch and scatter the first rays of sunlight. The paths have been swept clean of any debris the night winds might have deposited. Garden workers move through the shadows with quiet efficiency, ensuring that everything will be perfect for the morning walk that marks the beginning of each royal day. In the royal chamber, peace continues to reign, but now it's the peace of completion rather than ongoing rest. The night has fulfilled its ancient contract of restoration and renewal. The body has been refreshed through hours of careful rest. The mind has processed the previous day's experiences and prepared for new challenges. The spirit has been renewed through the mysterious alchemy that transforms fatigue into energy during sleep's beneficent reign. The breathing continues its subtle evolution toward waking patterns, still deep and regular, but showing the variations that indicate approaching consciousness. The body begins its own gentle preparations for movement, adjusting temperature and muscle tone in anticipation of the transition from rest to activity. These changes happen so gradually, they create no disturbance, allowing sleep to maintain its hold until the natural moment of release arrives. The oil lamp flickers once more, its flame dancing briefly before settling back to steady burning. The shadows it casts have grown long and soft, preparing to give way to the clear illumination that morning will provide. The chamber itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when rest will give way to the renewed activity of another day devoted to the ancient responsibilities of rule and service. As the eastern horizon brightens almost imperceptibly, as the first birds add their tentative voices to the growing symphony of dawn, as the palace completes its quiet transformation from place of rest to center of activity, the sleep continues its final phase. Not much longer now, perhaps 15 minutes, perhaps 20, before consciousness will return with its own gentle inevitability. The fine linen sheets seem to anticipate movement, though the sleeping figure remains perfectly still. The down mattress continues its perfect support, but now it seems ready to release, rather than simply hold. The chamber maintains its atmosphere of perfect peace and preparation, a sanctuary that has served its purpose and now prepares to transform once again into the starting point for another day's journey through the complex responsibilities of royal life. Soon, very soon, eyes will open to greet another morning beside the eternal Nile. The careful routines that define royal existence will begin again with washing and preparation and the gradual transformation from private individual to public queen. The day will unfold with its own rhythm of administrative duties, policy deliberations, social obligations, and spiritual observances. But for now, in these final precious moments of night's dominion, sleep reigns complete and undisturbed. The body rests in perfect comfort. The mind floats free of conscious concerns. The spirit reposes in the deep peace that comes from work well done and responsibilities faithfully discharged. The night holds, but barely. Dawn approaches with its own inevitabilities and possibilities. Another day waits to unfold with its familiar pattern of challenges and satisfactions. The eternal cycle of rest and activity, sleep and wakefulness, private restoration, and public service prepares to begin again. And in this perfect moment of transition, suspended between night's peace and day's promise, even the most powerful ruler participates in the fundamental rhythms that connect all human existence to the eternal cycles of nature and time. The sleep deepens one final time, gathering its remaining gifts before releasing consciousness to the brightening world. The oil lamp burns steadily in its corner, faithful guardian of the night's final moments. The shadows wait to retreat before the advancing light. The chamber maintains its perfect atmosphere of peace and preparation. And beside the flowing waters of the timeless Nile, sleep completes another ancient cycle of restoration and renewal. The first stirrings of consciousness arrive not as a sudden awakening, but as a gentle emergence from sleep's protective embrace. The breathing changes subtly, becoming less deep but more aware, as if the body itself recognizes that night's restorative work has reached its natural completion. The eyelids flutter once, twice, then settle back into stillness. But even in these brief moments, there's a sense that awareness hovers just beneath the surface of sleep, preparing for its graceful return. The oil lamp in the corner continues its faithful vigil, though its light now seems almost unnecessary as the first pale rays of actual sunlight begin to filter through the chamber's eastern windows. The shadows that have danced across the walls throughout the night grow softer and more diffuse, preparing their retreat before the advancing dawn. The chamber itself seems to exhale gently, releasing the held breath of night and preparing to welcome the activities of another day. Outside, Alexandria stirs with increasing purpose. The fishing boats that departed in darkness now return with their silver catch, their hulls riding low in the water with the bounty that will feed the city's markets. The lighthouse's beacon still sweeps across the harbor, but its importance diminishes with each passing moment as natural light begins to illuminate the familiar landmarks that guide vessels safely to port. In the palace gardens, the transformation accelerates. Morning flowers prepare to open their petals to greet the sun's arrival, while night-blooming varieties gracefully close their own display. The fountain's music seems to brighten, its water catching the first hints of actual sunlight and throwing them back in gentle sparkles that dance across marble surfaces. Birds add their voices to the growing symphony of dawn, their songs no longer tentative, but increasingly confident as light claims victory over darkness. The palace corridors show more definite signs of life as the night watch prepares to yield to day servants. The transition happens with practiced efficiency and ceremonial precision, each guard post transferred according to protocols established over centuries of royal service. In the kitchens, the final preparations for the morning meal reach their carefully timed conclusion. Bread emerges from ovens with crusts, golden and perfect. Fresh fruits are arranged with artistic precision. Water reaches the exact temperature that will provide maximum comfort for the morning ablutions. In the royal chamber, the sleeping figure begins to show the first subtle signs of approaching wakefulness. The breathing grows marginally shallower, the body temperature adjusts almost imperceptibly, and there's a quality of readiness that wasn't present during the deeper phases of night's rest. The hands remain still at the sides, but they seem somehow expectant, ready to resume their daily work of holding the symbols and tools of royal authority. The fine linen sheets rise and fall with breathing that grows less deep but more rhythmic, the body's preparation for the transition from horizontal rest to upright activity. The down mattress continues its perfect support, but the form it cradles shows increasing signs of readiness for movement. These changes happen so gradually, they create no disturbance, allowing sleep to maintain its protective hold until the precise moment when consciousness chooses to reclaim its territory. The chamber's atmosphere remains perfectly conducive to continued rest, but now it carries an unmistakable undertone of anticipation. The soft fragrances of the evening's aromatherapy have faded to barely perceptible traces, leaving the air clean and fresh for the new day's activities. The temperature holds steady at the perfect level for comfort, neither too warm nor too cool, creating conditions that support either continued sleep or gentle awakening as natural rhythms dictate. Outside the chamber windows, the eastern horizon shows unmistakable signs of the sun's approach. The pale colors strengthen steadily now, rose deepening toward coral, gold warming toward amber. This is no longer the tentative promise of dawn, but its confident announcement. The experienced eye can read the signs that indicate sunrise is perhaps 15 minutes away, that moment when the sun's disk will break free of the horizon and flood the world with the light that makes all things possible. The oil lamp flickers once more, its flame dancing briefly in what might be interpreted as acknowledgement that its long service nears completion. The light it provides grows less necessary with each passing moment, but it continues burning steadily, faithful to its duty until natural illumination makes its contribution redundant. The shadows it casts have grown long and soft, preparing for their graceful retreat before the advancing light. The sleeping figure's face remains peaceful, unmarked by the concerns that daylight will soon restore, but there's a subtle quality that suggests dreams may be shifting from the deep symbolic processing of night to the lighter, more recognizable images that often precede natural awakening. The features show no tension or disturbance, only the serene repose that comes from sleep that has accomplished its restorative purpose. As these final moments of true darkness pass, everything in the palace and beyond seems to pause in expectant readiness. Servants stand prepared to begin their morning duties the moment their services are required. The morning meal waits in carefully coordinated stages of preparation. Fresh linens are arranged with military precision. The bath water holds at perfect temperature. Every detail has been anticipated and prepared with the thoroughness that royal service demands. The palace gardens display their own completion of overnight preparations. Dew forms on leaves and petals, creating countless tiny mirrors that will catch and scatter the sun's first rays. The paths have been swept clean and watered to settle any dust. Garden workers have completed their pre-dawn tasks and withdrawn to allow the royal morning walk to proceed in perfect tranquility. In the royal chamber, the transition from sleep to wakefulness continues its measured progression. The breathing shows more definite changes now, still deep and regular, but carrying the rhythm that indicates consciousness is preparing to resurface. The body begins its own gentle preparations for movement, adjusting muscle tone and circulation in anticipation of the demands that waking life will soon impose. The chamber maintains its perfect atmosphere of peace and preparation, but now it seems to wait rather than simply exist. The oil lamp's flame burns steadily, ready to provide service until the last possible moment. The shadows prepare for their retreat. The fine linens anticipate movement. Everything holds in perfect readiness for the moment when sleep will release its protective hold and allow consciousness to reclaim its daily dominion. The breathing deepens one final time, then begins the subtle shift toward waking patterns. The eyelids flutter more noticeably now, though they don't yet open. The hands remain still, but there's a quality of tension that suggests awareness is gathering strength just beneath the surface of sleep. The face shows the first hints of the expressions that will mark conscious thought and feeling. Outside, the eastern horizon blazes with definite color. Now, rose and gold and amber paint the sky with the promise of another day beside the eternal Nile. The sun's arrival is no longer a distant possibility, but an immediate certainty. Perhaps 5 more minutes, perhaps 10, before the great disk breaks free of the horizon and floods Alexandria with the light that has awakened this ancient city for thousands of years. The oil lamp flickers once more, then settles into steady burning for these final moments of service. The shadows on the chamber walls grow softer and less distinct, preparing to yield to the clear illumination that approaches. The chamber itself seems to gather its energy for the transformation from sanctuary of sleep to starting point of another day's royal responsibilities. And then, as naturally as the sun rises over the Nile, as inevitably as the tide flows toward shore, consciousness returns. The eyes open slowly, without haste or alarm, to greet another morning in the eternal rhythm of royal life. The breathing deepens and quickens slightly as awareness spreads through body and mind. The hands move almost imperceptibly, the first conscious gestures of another day devoted to the ancient responsibilities of rule and service. The night is over, the day begins, and beside the flowing waters of the timeless Nile, the eternal cycle of rest and activity, sleep and wakefulness, private restoration, and public duty begins again. Another dawn breaks over Alexandria. Another day unfolds with its familiar patterns of challenge and satisfaction, and the careful routines that have sustained royal life for millennia prepare to begin once more. Siskora's sleep fades like mist before the morning sun, leaving behind only the gentle satisfaction of rest completed and strength restored. The oil lamp flickers one final time, then burns steady and bright, faithful guardian yielding to the greater light that floods through eastern windows. And in this perfect moment of transition, even the most powerful ruler awakens to face another day of the endless sacred responsibility of governance, restored by sleep's ancient gifts and ready for whatever challenges the new day may bring. The cycle continues, as it always has, as it always will, beside the eternal Nile.